What if the greatest sign that your deepest desire is about to arrive is not excitement, hope, or certainty, but silence? Not the silence around you, the silence within you. The moment your mind finally stops chasing may be the exact moment reality begins moving toward you. Most people believe manifestation begins when they think positively. But the final sign before a desire becomes real is far stranger. Today, you'll discover the hidden psychological shift that appears only once the old version of you is dying, and why almost everyone mistakes it for failure. If this exploration is changing the way you see your own journey, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Every week, we uncover timeless psychological insights that help you understand yourself, overcome inner conflict, and recognize the invisible patterns guiding your life. Now, let's continue toward the final sign that changes everything. The final sign before a desire manifests is rarely an event in the outside world. It begins with an invisible transformation inside you. For weeks, months, or even years, your mind may have been consumed with wanting, planning, worrying, and imagining. Every day became another attempt to force life into matching your expectations. Then, almost without realizing it, something changes. The emotional struggle becomes quieter. The constant urgency begins to fade. This is not the loss of your dream. It is the beginning of a profound inner threshold. It marks the moment when your relationship with your desire starts to transform, and with it, your relationship with yourself. Most people misunderstand this stage because it feels ordinary rather than dramatic. They expect the final sign to be a surge of confidence, an unmistakable vision, or a miraculous coincidence. Instead, they often experience a calm they cannot explain. The desire still exists, but it no longer controls every thought or emotion. The mind gradually stops asking, "When will it happen?" because something deeper has shifted. The need for immediate answers loses its grip. This quiet change is significant because it reflects a personality that is no longer defined by absence, but is beginning to act from inner completeness. At this threshold, the unconscious begins reorganizing itself. The hidden fears that once whispered, "You are not enough," or "You will never have what you seek," begin losing their authority. They may still appear, but they no longer dominate your decisions. Instead of reacting with panic, you observe them with surprising distance. This is a powerful psychological milestone. It reveals that your identity is no longer built around lack. The inner conflict that consumes so much energy starts dissolving, creating space for new possibilities to emerge naturally, rather than through force. This transformation often confuses people because nothing external may have changed. Your circumstances might look exactly the same. The opportunities you hoped for may not have appeared yet. The people you expected to hear from may still be silent. Yet internally, you are becoming someone different. You stop measuring every day by visible progress. You become more patient, more grounded, and less emotionally dependent on immediate results. Ironically, this is often the point where the mind becomes most receptive to meaningful change, because it is no longer trapped in desperate resistance. The inner threshold is not the finish line, it is the doorway. It is the silent crossing from chasing life to participating in it with trust and maturity. When you reach this point, your desire is no longer carrying the weight of your identity. Whether it arrives tomorrow or months from now, you remain whole. And that is the deepest mystery of transformation. The final sign before your desire manifests is often the moment you discover that you have already begun becoming the person who no longer needs the desire to feel complete. From that place of inner wholeness, life has room to unfold in ways the anxious mind could never predict. For most people, the greatest obstacle standing between them and their deepest desire is not the outside world. It is the invisible resistance they carry within. This resistance is rarely obvious. It hides behind constant overthinking, endless planning, emotional attachment, and the belief that every delay is proof of failure. The more desperately the conscious mind tries to control the outcome, the more tension it creates. This tension becomes an unseen barrier, causing every setback to feel like confirmation that the desire is slipping further away. Yet just before a profound transformation occurs, this resistance begins to weaken in ways that are almost impossible to notice. The collapse of resistance does not happen because life suddenly becomes easier. In fact, it often happens after repeated disappointments. There comes a point when the mind grows exhausted from fighting reality. It can no longer sustain the endless cycle of fear and control. What follows is not defeat but surrender, not surrender to failure, but surrender to the illusion that everything must happen according to your timetable. In this unexpected release, a remarkable shift takes place. You stop wrestling with uncertainty and begin allowing life to unfold without trying to force every detail. This inner surrender creates psychological freedom. Instead of spending every waking moment asking whether your desire is getting closer, your attention naturally returns to the present. You become more engaged in your daily life, your work, your relationships, and your own personal growth. The desire still matters, but it no longer dictates your emotional state. You discover that peace does not depend on immediate results. This realization quietly transforms your personality, replacing anxiety with patience, and replacing desperation with quiet confidence. Many people mistake this stage for giving up because the emotional intensity disappears. They think that if they are no longer obsessing over their goal, they must have lost their passion. But the opposite is true. The desire has moved deeper than conscious effort. It no longer needs constant mental repetition to remain alive. Instead, it becomes part of your identity, influencing your choices without consuming your thoughts. You begin acting naturally as someone who believes life is still unfolding in meaningful ways, even when the evidence is not yet visible. This is why the collapse of resistance is often the final sign before a desire manifests. It marks the moment when fear loses its authority and trust quietly takes its place. The inner battle ends, and with it, the invisible walls created by doubt and attachment begin to disappear. Whether the external outcome arrives immediately or later is no longer the central question. The real transformation has already happened within. By releasing the need to control every step, you become open to possibilities that could never enter a mind imprisoned by constant resistance. Often, it is only after this inner release that life begins moving in ways that once seemed impossible. Just before a profound desire begins to take shape in reality, many people experience what feels like an unexpected setback. Old fears suddenly return with surprising intensity. Doubts that had been silent begin speaking louder than ever. You may question your worth, your direction, or whether your dream was ever possible in the first place. At first glance, this appears to be a sign that you are moving farther away from your goal. Yet, psychologically, this moment often represents something entirely different. It is the final confrontation with the hidden parts of yourself that have long influenced your choices from the shadows. The human mind has a remarkable tendency to protect what is familiar, even when the familiar is painful. For years, you may have unknowingly built an identity around disappointment, rejection, or the fear of not being enough. These patterns become comfortable because they are known. As genuine change approaches, the unconscious mind often resists it, not because change is dangerous, but because it threatens the old identity that has defined you for so long. The closer you come to becoming a different person, the stronger this inner resistance may appear. This final test often arrives in subtle ways. You may suddenly feel the urge to quit just before an opportunity appears. You might overthink a decision that once felt obvious, or become unusually sensitive to criticism that would not have affected you before. Old emotional wounds may surface without warning, making you believe you are moving backward instead of forward. But these moments are not random. They reveal unresolved fears, asking for acknowledgement rather than avoidance. Instead of pushing them away, you begin to observe them with curiosity. In doing so, their power gradually begins to fade. The turning point comes when you stop identifying with these fears. Rather than believing every anxious thought, you recognize that thoughts are not always truth. You realize that the voice predicting failure is often echoing experiences from the past rather than describing your future. This awareness creates distance between who you are and what you fear. For the first time, you respond with calm instead of panic. The old emotional patterns lose their ability to control your decisions because they are no longer mistaken for your true identity. The shadow's final test is not designed to stop your transformation. It reveals whether you are ready to move beyond the version of yourself that has lived in fear. When you face your deepest doubts without allowing them to define you, something extraordinary happens. The struggle that once consumed your energy begins to dissolve, and a quieter, stronger self emerges. It is this inner victory, not the disappearance of fear, but your freedom from being ruled by it, that often marks the final psychological step before your desire begins unfolding in ways that once seemed impossible. The greatest breakthrough is not found in conquering the world outside you, but in no longer being conquered by the hidden fears within. One of the greatest paradoxes of human transformation is that your deepest desire often begins moving toward you only after it no longer controls your emotional world. At first, this sounds contradictory. How could letting go bring you closer to what you have been pursuing for so long? Yet detachment is not the same as indifference. It does not mean abandoning your dream or pretending you no longer care. True detachment means freeing your identity from the belief that your happiness depends entirely on one future outcome. It is the quiet realization that your value exists before your desire arrives, not because of it. For a long time, many people unknowingly place their entire sense of worth into something they have not yet achieved. They tell themselves that life will finally begin when they find the right relationship, earn more success, receive recognition, or accomplish a long-awaited goal. This creates an invisible prison where the present moment is constantly sacrificed for an imagined future. Every delay feels like proof that life is incomplete. But eventually a profound shift occurs. You begin to recognize that no external achievement can permanently fill an inner emptiness that has never been understood. As this awareness grows, your relationship with desire changes completely. Instead of chasing from fear, you begin moving with purpose. Instead of seeking validation from the outside world, you start discovering stability within yourself. You enjoy your daily experiences without constantly measuring whether they are bringing you closer to your goal. Your peace becomes less dependent on circumstances and more rooted in the person you are becoming. This quiet confidence cannot be manufactured through positive thinking alone. It develops through self-awareness, emotional honesty, and the willingness to face yourself without judgment. This inner wholeness transforms the way you interact with life. You stop forcing conversations, manipulating situations, or obsessing over every sign and coincidence. You become more patient because your emotional survival no longer depends on immediate results. Ironically, this relaxed state often makes you more open, more creative, and more authentic. Opportunities that once seemed impossible begin appearing because your actions are no longer driven by fear of loss. People are naturally drawn to those who carry quiet confidence rather than emotional desperation, and life itself often responds differently when resistance has dissolved. Detachment is not the end of desire, it is the beginning of freedom. When your happiness no longer depends on controlling every outcome, you discover a deeper kind of fulfillment that exists regardless of external success. From this place of inner wholeness, your desires become expressions of your growth rather than desperate attempts to complete yourself. And this may be the most mysterious sign of all. The moment you no longer need your desire to prove your worth is often the very moment you become psychologically prepared to receive it. True manifestation begins not when you finally possess what you wanted, but when you realize you have already become whole without it. As your inner world begins to transform, you may notice something curious happening around you. Certain conversations seem perfectly timed. A forgotten opportunity suddenly returns. You repeatedly encounter the same ideas, symbols, places, or people in ways that feel strangely connected. These moments often appear too meaningful to dismiss as ordinary chance. Yet the true significance of these experiences does not lie in proving that the universe is sending secret messages. Their deeper value lies in revealing that your mind has become more aware, more attentive, and more aligned with possibilities that once passed unnoticed. For most of life, the human mind is occupied with fear, distraction, and routine. It filters reality through old expectations, often overlooking opportunities that do not match familiar patterns. But as inner resistance begins to dissolve, perception changes. You become more present, more observant, and more open to subtle connections between events. Experiences that once seemed random begin to carry personal meaning because your consciousness is no longer trapped in survival mode. The world itself has not necessarily changed, rather, your way of seeing it has become richer and more integrated. This does not mean every coincidence should be treated as a prophecy. The mind has a natural tendency to search for patterns, and not every repeated number, unexpected meeting, or familiar symbol holds profound significance. The wiser approach is to ask what these experiences reveal about your own inner state. Perhaps they encourage courage where fear once ruled. Perhaps they remind you of a forgotten goal or inspire you to take a step you had been avoiding. Their power comes not from predicting the future, but from awakening greater awareness in the present. As this heightened awareness develops, your decisions become more intuitive without becoming impulsive. You begin trusting the quiet voice beneath constant mental noise. Instead of forcing every outcome through endless analysis, you recognize when an opportunity genuinely resonates with your values and personal growth. This balance between reason and intuition creates a new way of navigating life. You are no longer reacting from anxiety, but responding with clarity, allowing meaningful opportunities to be recognized instead of overlooked. Perhaps the final sign before your desire manifests is not a dramatic miracle, but a profound shift in perception. The meaningful coincidences you experience are reminders that your inner and outer worlds are beginning to communicate in new ways. They invite you to pay closer attention, not because they guarantee a specific outcome, but because they reflect a mind becoming more conscious, more integrated, and more receptive to life's unfolding possibilities. When you learn to recognize meaning without becoming dependent on signs, you step into a deeper form of confidence, one that no longer searches desperately for proof, because it has learned to trust the quiet intelligence emerging from within. The final sign before your desire manifests is not that the world suddenly changes, it is that you do. Most people believe manifestation is about attracting something they do not have. But the deepest transformation begins when the person who desperately needed that outcome slowly disappears. Without realizing it, you begin thinking differently, responding differently, and seeing life through a new perspective. The old habits that once kept you trapped no longer feel natural. It is as though an invisible version of yourself has quietly reached the end of its journey, making room for someone stronger to emerge. This inner rebirth is often far more significant than the desire itself, because it changes not only what you receive, but who you become. This transformation rarely happens overnight. It is built through countless moments of choosing awareness instead of fear, patience instead of panic, and understanding instead of self-judgment. Every challenge that once seemed like an obstacle becomes part of a deeper education. The disappointments that once convinced you to give up begin revealing hidden strengths you never knew you possessed. Looking back, you realize that life was not simply delaying your desire, it was shaping your character, so that when the opportunity arrived, you would have the wisdom and emotional maturity to receive it without losing yourself. One of the clearest signs of this new self is the disappearance of constant emotional dependence on external outcomes. You no longer wake up measuring your worth by whether life is unfolding exactly as you imagined. Success no longer inflates your identity. and temporary setbacks no longer destroy your confidence. Instead, a quiet stability begins to replace emotional extremes. You become less reactive and more reflective. Decisions arise from clarity rather than desperation, and your confidence comes from knowing who you are, instead of from proving yourself to others. This inner balance is the foundation upon which lasting transformation is built. As this new personality takes shape, your relationships, ambitions, and daily choices naturally begin to change. You are drawn toward people who encourage growth rather than reinforce fear. You release habits that once provided temporary comfort but prevented genuine progress. Even your conversations become different because your attention is no longer consumed by what is missing. Instead of chasing approval, you seek authenticity. Instead of controlling every outcome, you focus on becoming the kind of person who can meet uncertainty with wisdom and courage. This quiet shift influences every area of your life, often without you noticing it at first. The birth of the new self is the greatest manifestation of all, because every external achievement eventually fades, but a transformed personality continues shaping your future long after a single desire has been fulfilled. The opportunity you have been waiting for may indeed arrive, but by then you will understand something far more valuable. The real miracle was never the achievement itself, it was the person you had to become in order to meet it. And perhaps that is the final sign before any true manifestation. The moment you realize that your greatest desire was never meant to change your life alone. It was meant to change you. Because once the new self is born, the life that once seemed impossible begins to feel like the most natural expression of who you have become.